All right, Quinlan Vos. Why am I hyped for Quinlan Vos? Well, I've already kind of talked about it. All that screen time in Phantom Menace got me really jonesed up. No, I mean, he's a yellow hero unit in a set that got some sick stuff. He has a 5 deploy cost with 7 booty. Nice. And he's got great traits. Force, Jedi, Republic. All those things got me looking at him. And then you look a little closer, and his front side ability is Crack-a-lact. You know, I'm not going to read it to you. You can read. That's straight presentation. But what I will say is that when you can damage your opponent's unit on the same curve as you, that is going to present some interesting options for you to easily trade with their units to pop shields, even though there's no shields in this set. Interesting. But anyway, love it, but kind of weird. My guard shield deck is a little bummed about that, but that's another video. No, but so I can use, you know, 2 power, maybe 4 booty, what's that, R2, to go ahead and efficiently trade into a value trade when you kill them and you don't die, right? Value trade a Battlefield Marine, that seems pretty good. So when we start to extrapolate that, we're going to present a lot of opportunities to kill units that our opponent is playing and value trade into them, kind of buffing the stats of your own unit. It's like with Cad Bane, right? Although his ping is, you know, your opponent gets to choose, and now when they only have one thing out, it operates similarly. And here the condition is that they have to have the same cost on his front side. Back side, a little different, which is really potent as well. So what you can start to do is you can start to build in these lines. What are the most common 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops? How am I going to combat them? And then things start to make a clear picture. Also, whenever you have a very easy ping to get off, you immediately can start thinking about Tarkentown. I think that's a great option. And we'll get more into that. And then just kind of flipping, just showing, you know, he's showing off. Look at those muscles. Gotta love it. Another thing, when I look at a leader like this with 3 and 7, he screams like, you know, I wear equipment well. So if you were going to go green, and we'll talk about it, like he would wear a General's blade well. He would wear Jedi's lightsaber very well because of his, you know, 5 deploy. Kind of like, you know, you can think of his flip turns similar to Cheer It in that, do I put a lightsaber on him and then do something else? Do I, like, how do I build around this flip? Because I think he is someone you want to build around, whether it's like put a lightsaber on him and then, you know, it binds or whatever. That'd be the blue version, which is probably my least favorite, but that's kind of the picture that I want to present to you. So I'm going to go into the little deck builder, and we'll look at 2 kind of options there and just kind of talk about them. All right, so the first kind of combination that I'm going to talk about is Quinlan Vos with Tarkentown. And this option kind of presents a really interesting aggro element in that you can get out an early unit that can ping your opponents, Tarkentown them, and get super far ahead right off the rip. Although that might not be the only way you want to use it. I think sometimes it's okay to kind of sandbag your Tarkentown and really try to find where the most value is. You know, sometimes being able to ping, you know, a 4 drop on parity with them and then get rid of that can get you even further ahead. So being mindful of that, but the premise is here that at some point in the early game you are able to ping something of theirs and let yourself get far ahead. And so when I look at this kind of deck, and I've got it set to, like, you know, the kind of units, I want to find early units that I think either trade really well or present some serious pressure. And so one unit that I really like right now is obviously the new R2, because he can ping their unit. And where are you, little buddy? Hold on, I might be, no, I got Twilight of the Republic. All right, let's use the search function, R2. Okay, so, you know, there's a lot, like the kind of standard, right? And so when we're building this deck, we're going to think about building lines. I talk about that on my personal channel. If you haven't subbed or haven't checked it out, please do. We're going to talk about building lines. So here's a line we're going to build of, we have a 2-drop cutie with 4 health, most of them only have 3. And so the trade-off here is that he only has 2 power. Thanks to Quinlan, we are able to ping that and then value trade our opponent, or ping and target down and get far ahead. But that R2 is probably the guy that's just going to value trade and make things problematic for them. Then, you still have your standard. Like Sabine is always going to be good. Oh, we'll get to her. We're going to throw her in there, but we will get to her. I think she's incredible. Talk about wearing equipment as well. But, even Sabine, like sometimes Sabine can have a little bit of trouble into a battlefield Marine. Now, you don't have to worry as much because she's going to be able to get that ping off. So if they want to try to, they're not going to be able to value trade you in the same way, and she still presents some great options. Another thing that can value trade really well, did I do that right? Or is it 1? Oh my God, I'm so L3. There you go. Another thing that can value trade really well is a 2, it kind of performs similarly to like an R2, is a 2-drop with shield, right? And so L337 performs pretty well there. And then I like that, we do have that smuggle option for later in the game. And seeing like legendaries like Cad Bane come into the fold and whether he will be playable, it's like, okay, I have some insulation there. So I actually like really like that unit. So like, we'll stop on the 2-drops actually I want to talk about Jin. Sorry, but like those are the kind of 2-drops I'm looking at. And then like another really cool one is Jin, and Jin presents an interesting problem in that when you're using this Tarkentown and Quinlan Vos ping combo, they kind of are forced to trade into her, or she can start hitting them for 4 pretty easily and getting around any pesky units. And because if you're on the draw or you pass potentially, although that can you got to be careful passing on turn 1. She can ping off shields off of some of these other pesky guys that would maybe prevent you from playing her. So I think Jin could be really good in this set. As you want to race, and giving her +1 in Saboteur kind of cracked. And so that would be how I build lines, looking at these 2-drops and seeing how they interact. And you can do that down the board. Another big break point is 4 health. You have your Cassians, you have your Sabines, you have your 4 health 4-drops or 5 health 3-drops. So trying to find ways to counteract that might be where you want to use Tarkentown, because as you look into the 3-drops, there's not a ton of ways. Although Jin, if you kill somebody, can get 4, and 4 plus a ping could be really good. So as we look into our drops, Jesse kind of is somebody who you might want to look to. He pairs well. You can't ping off those little dudes until something happens. But if you're able to get ahead on the board with the Tarkentown and everything, you can use your first turn play to kind of clean up some of those problematic, what are they called? Battle droids that could kind of get in your way. But a lot of the 3-drops have. So the good ones are the easier ones to kill are the 3/4s, right? Because you have your own 3-drop, pings off their shield now they're 3 health, and you can use your Sabine to finish them off too. So it's kind of interesting. You can go Sabine unit or Jin, ping Tarkentown their guy, they play a 3-drop. Then you play your 3-drop, ping it, and now they're going to get your 1-drop is going to get a lot of distance, your first turn play. And then 5 is that break point, and like how do we deal 5 to things? That could also be where you want to use it. So finding out where you want to target town, how you want to do it is important, but knowing that the premise of this type of strategy is to keep your guys alive and use the ping to value trade and or clear a pesky unit to target town. But this deck becomes pretty good. And say you get blown out at any point, you have Ahsoka to kind of catch you back up. I think she's solid. Although in this deck, you might just be jamming her out as a 3/4, or you could play Ezra and use Ahsoka in the sideboard for the go wide deck. So those would be options you're looking to figure out. Or if you find you're just being really aggressive, you have the Jin Saboteur, maybe you're going fighters and you're maybe going like a different red lean. But the next card I really wanted to highlight here is Plo Koon. And so when you're building this deck, we're trying to, get ahead on board with the Ping and Tarkin Town to set up a pretty nice coordinate with Plo Koon. I think he's insane. And the great thing about him is when you have coordinate, he's hitting for 6 and pinging, which means, and we'll talk about this more, which means against, Bobas or opposing Quinlan Vos, if you have the coordinate, you get the ping for the match and you get the raid 3 ambush. And the beauty of that is, like, you don't even have to deploy your leader. One of the things that we saw in set 1, and honestly I think is still good, and if I was playing Boba ECL, I would have done it in the middle part of this PQ meta, and that was Steadfast Battalion, right? You needed to deploy your leader, which meant you could get in these awkward situations where they're trying to, tie your leader hostage. Plo Koon doesn't have to worry about that, and so you're able to keep your leader safe out of the battlefield but still in play, right? That's how it works now. And get them. And then another cool one that we have here is now our Han Solo. Not only can he take, if Quinlan Vos is flipped, he can take out, things. But even if he's not, Han Solo can now take out your Lukes and your Vaders without taking any damage back, and that is super important. I mean, the big thing about him is that he goes in and deals with things and doesn't take any back. But when you can expand that pool of things that he kills, that is huge. So like, now we just made one of the best 7 drops in the game. Especially in yellow, even better. So that's, a really cool thing there. And then I just wanted to talk about space a little bit. And then, I said I would talk about Sabine, right? So what I love about Sabine is, when you play her, she gets to keep herself safe that first turn. And then if you have initiative, she can really start going to town on your opponent. And so like when I play Sabine, like I want to be playing blasters, putting a blaster on Sabine, hitting them for 6, and then they have to use some kind of event to get rid of her, can really put your opponent on a clock. So Sabine is kind of like an all-star for me in these types of decks because of the fact that you can play for the board, use the ping, use the Tarkin Town, get ahead, and then really pressure them hard with Sabine unit. And so they kind of have like, to answer her, and that can be problematic. And then in space, like another common thing that can come up, I'm trying out Anakin's Interceptor right now because of the fact that like I could ping, say a, sometimes you don't want to deploy to space after your opponent's A-wing. Well, now I can, and if they want to hit into me, they'll just trade, and then if they don't, I get the ping and the attack and my guy lives. So it kind of pressures them to make a trade into me where they otherwise wouldn't, which I like. I think that when you can, get your opponent worried about what you're doing and you're able to kind of up the tempo and pressure them, and then you've left your Tarkin Town still available. Like, to me, that's a sick line. So I actually like the 2-3 in space here. Whereas, when you play, and you can still play A-Wing, and it's a great card, but like it doesn't work with A-Wing, right? Because you play A-Wing, you get the ping, they attack into yours, that one still lives. Now you can play a 2-drop and finish it off the next turn, completely reasonable play, so that's why I still like it. However, I just wanted to highlight Anakin's Interceptor here because that is a cool line that can develop. And so, again, talking about building lines and talking about how decks interact with each other is really important. And then because there's, another thing I want to talk about, and another reason why I love playing in, we're going to events, baby. We get to be a Force throw deck, right? So which means, here's another thing. It's like, okay, what are his traits? Force Jedi, blah, blah, blah. We have, we can play Ezra. We have Ahsoka. We have Plo Koon that we've talked about that needs to be in there. And so we get to be a Force throw deck, which is an incredible card. It's on a stick here. He's sticky, right? 7 health. Love that about him. And then, which means you might want to just kind of insulate yourself a little bit more there. But it also means we get to do the K2 with the pillage. package. And so now we're able to fight the ground with the ping and the target town, but we have a really good plan against control. And like anything, like I always say when building decks, you know, the deck is the 60 cards. Maybe some of this ends up in the sideboard as we identify, and we get to play Kira too. That is pretty cool. She's probably a boarded card. But oh, another Jedi right there. So now we're talking, we get early coordinate, we get Jedi, we get card advantage. So yeah, this deck is starting to round itself out, right? We have Jedi, which means we get to play Force Throw, which means we can pair and pillage in K2, where, I mean, the Force Throws should be main here. We have it on a stick. We have 7 costs. But what the makeup of those other cards can be is really interesting. And we also have Spark of Rebellion. So we can get ahead on board. We can start to pull key pieces from our opponent where they're not able to catch back up. And then we can slam the door with Sabine and Blasters and Quinlan Vos and Plo Koon and all that good stuff. So this deck kind of rounds itself out to be what I call like a tempo disruption deck. You're playing, you know, some amount of ambush units, not as many as we'll get to do in green because of ECL and some of the cards in that pool, but we get some ambush, we get card disruption, discard, we get the target town, which is going to help us develop the board better, and then we can really shut the door on them. So this is a cool strategy, dude. If you like aggro tempo, if you like putting your opponent in a position to make tough choices, and really interact with them well, I think this deck can do it. We're a Spark of Rebellion, we get our Pillage, Force Throw, K2, all that good stuff, and that'll be very problematic for the control decks post board if you decide to kind of do a different amalgamation based off of, you know, what the developing meta is. So that's just a quick highlight on Quinlan Vos Red, Tarkin Town. I think it's in great shape, and we'll talk about green for a little bit, and then yeah, I probably won't talk about blue much. It's really just, we'll touch on it real quick. It'll be a card density pool of the Jedis that I've talked about a million times, throwing in some, now there are 2 of them, and trying to cheat out like an early, you know, Luke or Rey or something like that. But yeah, the main ones I'm going to highlight are the red, which looks dope, and, or it looks dope, and the green we'll talk about right now. All right, now for Quinlan Vos green. We're obviously going to talk about some of the same kind of concepts here in terms of building lines that interact with your opponents. I've already talked about some of those early drops, so I kind of like the same ones of L337 and R2. I mean, I think like you still got to play Battlefield Marine. Like, he's awesome. And one thing he can do too is like he can ping off his shield. I know that like shoot first isn't as prevalent in the meta. I think that card is still really good. And so like one thing I still like is like he pings off his shield for your opponent's unit, and so like they can't do that same. Well, they can do shoot first. Cracked. Well, they can't keep the shield, but no, they can. You know, when they have pumps on these early units with shields, he kind of gets blown out. I like that no longer happens. What else can I say about it? We'll put in the same guys that I had. Another one I like. Speaking of shields, I actually like the line of Cloud Rider, even though like we're playing coordinate, and again he like this is just, you know, things that I'm thinking about. If there are a lot of shielded 2-drops in the meta, Cloud Rider pings the shield off and then takes him out. And then when you draw him later in the game, he's still a good ambush. And if your Quinlan Vos is flipped and they have, what do they call, tokens out, he then can present like a really nice 2-for-1 later in the game where he pings off a token and then finish somebody with his ambush. So I still like Cloud Rider in this deck, although we're trying to create sticky units early with the ping to get value trades, because a great card in green is Hu Yang. Hu Yang, a Jedi droid that pumps up your buddies. I've kind of called him like a green wing leader. Obviously those cards are not the exact same, but they operate functionally pretty similar. And so I love Hu Yang. And if you've got early Jedi, and you have a Jedi leader, one really cool card to talk about is the General's Blade. And also we talked about Sabine earlier, right? I just want to get these pieces in play. Well, you know, so we can all see them. So Sabine, obviously not a Jedi, but wears equipment really well. You can General's Blade a Sabine and start hitting in for 7, and then they can't attack back. That can present a really interesting race later in the game. You're obviously going to play blasters in this deck. And so Quinlan Vos, with his 7 booty, 3 health, he screams, upgrade me a little bit, and I will be just an absolute monster. And so, you're playing your blades, you're playing your blasters, and you kind of have a really good threat built into your deck. And obviously you can do the thing with the Hu Yang, General's Blade, and then on your next turn, what would you have? 5 resources, -2. You could play, Han unit pretty quickly in this deck, which is kind of crazy. So, why are we in green? Well, we got ECL, which lets us play some interesting things. One, now if we want to ECL Sabine, she can take out the Sabine leader, right? Take a few damage, and then because she's tapped, they can't attack her back. So ECLing Sabine, one of the things that happens is you get that ECL off. It's nice. You've dealt some damage to someone else, but it gets cleaned up very easily. ECLing her, they cannot do that so quickly, and so she can kind of be this damaged unit that stays out there and is really problematic for them because, if you keep initiative, she can attack in and they're like, taking damage. So she's going to present a really good threat to your opponent, really good pressure, and she's obviously going to let herself get, more incremental value. She ECLs into something and then she untaps and kills something else. That's getting really nice value out of our 4-drop. If we can keep doing things like that, we'll be in great shape. So we've talked about ECL, and why else might we have ECL? Well, and why are we building lines? Where are you? You're at the beginning, right? A Rod? No. You know what it did? I bet it did. No, she's here. How do I spell this woman's name? Ayla Secura. Doing a 5-cost 6/5 ambush because of ECL, right? We're talking about in the context of ECL. We can ECL her into opposing Quinlan Vos that come out, ping it and kill her without ever having to deploy ours. We can kill Boba Fett, obviously one of the best, if not the best. It is the best leader in the game. So now we have a plan. We've built in a line to deal with our opponent's leader, and we have 2 ways to do that, and we have a way of not even using ECL, which I'll talk about in a second. So we've talked about building in lines, we've talked about how our decks interact. One of the things you want to do when building decks is have a plan for your opponent's leader. It is the most important pretty much part of the game, and so you need to have a plan built in for every prominent leader you can think of. What are the 2 most prominent leaders? Sabine and Boba, and we have plans for them. And so another plan that we have, which is very easy and nice, is modded cohorts. Modded cohorts now is hitting a 4-drop for 5, so we can just kind of hang out with our modded cohort and very cleanly and easily deal with an opposing Sabine. So now we have a plan for opposing Quinlan Vos's, because I think he's going to be popular. We have a plan for Boba. We have a plan for Sabine, and that's a great place to be. And so when I'm looking at green, what else am I talking about? We're talking about cheating things out early. We're talking about playing for the board. You're obviously going to have your Plo Koon in there. You're going to have your Han Solo. We've already talked about him. And another card that I like is Home One. Home One is a great late game option for this deck. It gives the control decks a lot of problems, and I don't see why you wouldn't be okay going all the way up to 8 here, because of just the insane value that you are provided through this color scheme. And it's really exciting colors. I love it. I think that it could even be better than the red, because while Tarkentown does have that really good option of getting ahead, giving units that don't have ambush, like I don't think you can really play Ayla without ECL. I think that she just kind of takes a lot of resources to do nothing. So now we've turned her into just an absolute boss, and she can pair really well when we're talking about kind of looking at how this deck curves out. We can modded cohort into Ayla, right? ECL, and then our next turn we still have things like Plo Koon out there, so we can just be hitting them with ambushes over and over again, which is really hard for them to deal with. And then, when looking at the Space Suite, I think we can go ahead and just say, you know what, we don't even need a 2-drop green. Doesn't really have them. We could look into, where is it? The Hot Shot, and that could play similarly to like the Anakin thing I talked about, where if we need a 2-drop, we can Hot Shot, ping it, and they are kind of forced to hit back. But I mean, when you have things like Falcon and Bright Hope to kind of hold you off, I think you're okay not even having a 2-drop and saying, like, if they go to space, they're either going to get gummed up by one of these, and they'll might get a few chip points in and kind of be done with it. Another card I wanted to highlight that's really good with ECL, although we have to be careful. We have to be very careful of not having too many things that suck up ECL and then are no longer good. But I think Echo is a really underrated card. I played him a lot in set 2 when I was trying out Luke. And because of, if you look down this list, and I don't even have all of them, but we have so many unique units, including the Plo, including the Bright Hope, the Millennium Falcon, the second Millennium Falcon. Oh, I wanted to talk about that. I did not talk about that yet. Shoot, I'll go back to Echo really quick. Falcon, right? Okay. Another good thing about Falcon, and it should be in the red deck, is it costs 6, so you get a ping plus 5 attack that takes out a fire spray. Pretty good. So that's a built-in line that's dealing with opponent leaders, but also dealing with their very problematic cards. We talked about, how Han Solo takes out a Luke and a Vader now. Millennium Falcon now takes out Fire Spray. Dope. All right, so Echo. Because this deck has so many unique units, one thing we can do is we can play the Echo Bash Brothers. I talked about Cloud Rider as a 2-drop that gets better in the late game. So does Echo, and Home 1 can get him. So that could be a route we go. And then one thing that I'm noticing from the green-yellow deck is there's not a ton of Restore. So when you can get it is really important, and it creates that way that you can pressure them and then get health back on your base. So we might want to look at Restore options, Echo, pumping up, throwing something to the discard just to get it back with Home 1 seems like a good value proposition. So look to Echo as someone that you can lean on. Other cool things that you can do in the sideboard with green is you can play Tech and Spark of Hope. And so you, against control decks that are killing your guys, you're able to kind of always have Tech. You can get Tech back through Spark of Hope. You can get Tech back through Home 1. It becomes very sticky and very hard for them to run you out of threats. And so you can run them out of threats pretty easily through an attrition war. So that's one thing that green, builds in and is very nice. Any other green cards I want to talk about with you? General's Blade, got it. Home 1, Bright Hope. We talked about Plo Koon a bunch. Ayala, modded cohorts, Hu Yang. Yeah, so, I mean, with ECL and with the nice yellow ambush units, we're able to kind of consistently pressure our opponent, pick the tempo of the game. We have options with Echo if we want to go that route, or just stick with, the Sabine and modded cohort plan, making sure that we do not have too much things that need to be ECL'd, because then, they don't super work that way. Plo Koon is a bow, so we talked about Millennium Falcon. And you still get, Spark of Rebellion, and you could play Unmasking the Conspiracy, depending on what problematic cards can come up. So here is another well-rounded strategy with great pressure, tempo that controls the board, and a good sideboard plan with, things like Unmasking the Conspiracy and Kira. I would main deck Spark of Rebellions, that you can kind of, deal with problematic cards before they pop up. So this is Quinlan Vos. 2 great colors that you can play with him. About 30 minutes of me talking at you. Mustache content, books in the back, messy office over my shoulder. All good things that you like here on the KTOD page. Hit me up in the comments with any ideas that you had for the Quinlan Vos deck, things that I forgot. Do you think now there are 2 of them should be in the green and the red? Let me know. And best of luck as you start to build decks for the new set. It's dope.